Here on BBC One, afternoon drama with doctors in an hour at the new time of 2. After the news, next.
Your smart speaker is seriously smart because it can now access BBC Sounds. Just say, smart speaker, ask BBC Sounds to play your favourite music or podcast. You can even pause, rewind or restart live radio. Perfect. Listen on BBC Sounds.
You ready for this?
BBC iPlayer. Love what you find. Find what you love. Binge watch brilliant shows.
I'm making the same mistakes over and over again.
Live stream BBC TV. Unbelievable! Find your next big obsession.
This is good. We're going to have some fun.
Just press red.
Who are you talking to? Them at home.
For the best way to watch TV on BBC iPlayer.
Do you want some more gold? Are you scared about splitting any couple up?
No.
This test is called Behind Closed Doors.
I think I might have started some drama.
Anything could happen.
The path to love is never straight. I Kissed a Girl. Watch on BBC iPlayer.
This is BBC One, now 1 o'clock the news with Sally Nugent.
Today at 1, the Conservatives pledged to clarify the legal definition of a person's sex. The Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch says this would make it easier to protect women-only spaces. Also on the programme.
3, 2, 1.
Work starts on the Rob Burrow Centre for Motor Neurone Disease just hours after the rugby league hero died in hospital, surrounded by his family.
He was asked, we were all there, and Rob, he used his eyes a lot for yes and no, and his eyes went,
There was
no
hesitation, was there?
No hesitation whatsoever. He wants it to go ahead today.
His best friend, Kevin Sinfield, who's raised millions of pounds for research into the disease, says this is the moment they were all working for.
As you can see, he's pretty raw still. He'll leave a massive hole. And I know there'll be a lot of people out there who are heartbroken this morning.
And 80 years on, we hear from one of the oldest surviving veterans of D-Day.
On BBC London, the impact of stolen tools on tradespeople. Hundreds will be protesting through Westminster this lunchtime to raise awareness of tool theft on people's livelihoods.
Hello and welcome to the BBC News at 1, live from Salford. The Conservative Party is promising to tackle what it calls the confusion over the legal definition of a person's sex if it wins the general election. The Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch said her party wants to crack down on what she described as predatory men who claim to identify as female to gain access to women-only spaces. With more details, here's our political correspondent, Ione Wells.
Should only people who are biologically female be able to use women's services? Just people who are biologically female, or also those who have changed their legal sex on their birth certificate? The Conservatives say women's services should be able to refuse anyone who is biologically male without facing legal challenges.
It's quite clear that the intentions in the law are being misinterpreted just because of changes, social changes. And what we are trying to do is re-emphasise that sex in the law means biological sex. It always has done, but there's been a lot of misinterpretation, and we are adding that clarification so that the law is clearer.
The Liberal Democrats are known for their own stunts, but they and Labour have accused this policy of being a distraction from other issues.
This is a cynical distraction from the litany of Conservative failures to try and once again stoke up a phony culture war. Liberal Democrats have been very clear on this issue. If there are any examples of where a public service needs to have further guidance, we're happy to issue that guidance. But let's not pick apart legislation that reflects the hard-fought and hard-won protections given to women, to trans women and to all sorts of people from protected characteristics.
The Equality Act, which Labour brought in 2010 and the Tories opposed, already protects single-sex spaces for biological women. It already defines what a woman is. What's certainly needed is clearer guidance and for service providers about how to safeguard those women-only spaces.
The Conservatives also said they would remove the powers of the devolved Scottish, Welsh and Northern Irish governments over gender policy. It comes after the UK government intervened last year to stop Scotland making it easier for people to change their legal gender.
What has been suggested by the Conservatives today is just another example of undermining the powers of the Scottish Parliament. Now, obviously, I don't want to see that because I believe we should have a Parliament with the full range of powers to tackle all of the issues that affect the people of Scotland. But I think people in Scotland need to be aware that it's only SNP MPs that will stand up to protect the powers of the Scottish Parliament, which are being eroded by the Conservatives.
The Conservatives argue this pledge is about privacy and principle, but Tory strategists also hope it will put other parties on the spot about where they stand. Ione Wells, BBC News in Westminster.
Well, our social affairs editor, Alison Holt, is in our London newsroom for us this afternoon. And, Alison, this is a complex issue and it really does evoke very strong feelings, doesn't it?
It certainly does, Sally. It's a really contentious area and is at the heart of many of the culture wars which we've had in recent years over our evolving interpretation of words like gender and sex. Now, the Equality Act was passed in 2010, so society has changed a lot since then. And the way it's written at times uses the terms gender and sex interchangeably. The Conservatives say they want to bring clarity to this area, being really clear that they are talking about biological sex, sex at birth in the Act. So that could mean by protecting it would they say it will protect spaces, particularly women's spaces, and it could, for instance, mean that in a rape crisis centre or a women-only hospital ward, that a woman who is not born, only women who are born as women will be able to go into that ward. A trans woman who was born male would not be able to. But there are huge complexities over this. For instance, a trans man, someone who was born as a woman, what would happen then? Presumably they would also be able to use the ward. There is a need for clarity in this area, say many people, but there is an awful lot of complicated implications in making any changes to the law.
Alison Holt, thank you. Well, our political correspondent Hannah Miller is in Bury, where the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is on the campaign trail. And Hannah, he has been talking about national security today, hasn't he?
Yes, this event in Bury today was as much about the presentation, really, as it was about policy. Sir Keir Starmer, surrounded by 10 veterans, all of them now standing to be Labour MPs, an attempt, really, to neutralise Conservative Party attacks that his party can't be trusted with defence. He said that he would push the nuclear button if it was necessary, and he talked about his commitment to the nuclear deterrent being absolute. Let's have a listen.
We'll maintain Britain's continuous at-sea deterrent 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Deliver all the needed upgrades, and we will build 4 new nuclear submarines, like the ones I saw in Barrow, that won't just keep us safe, but will also support good jobs and growth across the UK.
It was striking at times that this was in some ways quite a personal pitch about the importance of defence, and that is because while Keir Starmer can say that he's proud of his own record in terms of voting on this, he's perhaps not quite so proud of that of some members of his shadow cabinet, including his deputy leader Angela Rayner, who, when previously there was a vote about renewing the nuclear deterrent, she actually voted against it. Keir Starmer was asked about that this morning, asked whether all of his team are quite so on board with the Labour Party talking proudly about defence and about nuclear deterrent in this way. His response was, of course, as we've heard before, that the party has changed. He said the most important thing is that he voted in favour, that he leads from the front, and that this is an issue he feels very strongly about.
Hannah Miller, thank you. The Liberal Democrats are promising new protections for rivers and coastlines if they get into power. The party says it will expand marine protected areas and introduce a new blue flag status for rivers to end what they call environmental vandalism. Leader Sir Ed Davey says families should be free to swim safely in the knowledge that our waters are not polluted with sewage. The leaders of 4 of Scotland's parties will take part in a televised debate tonight. The SNP's John Swinney, Labour's Anas Sarwar, the Liberal Democrats' Alex Cole-Hamilton and the Scottish Conservative leader Douglas Ross will join the 90-minute debate, which starts at 9 o'clock on STV. The Scottish Green Party has described their omission as outrageous. Work has begun this morning on the Rob Burrow Centre for Motor Neurone Disease as tributes continue to pour in for the former rugby league player who died yesterday at the age of 41. Fans have been laying flowers and cards at Headingley, where he played for Leeds Rhinos until his diagnosis nearly 5 years ago. Our correspondent John Maguire has this report.
3, 2, 1...
It's the moment that Rob Burrow was determined would go ahead today without delay, as spades went into the ground for the first time to create the Motor Neurone Disease Centre in Leeds that will bear his name. Along with Rob's family was his former teammate Kevin Sinfield. Between them, they've raised almost £15 million. Some of that money will help to build this centre. It will be Rob's legacy.
I wish you could have seen the outpouring of love. I think we all lose special people, but it's very, very rare you lose someone who's so special to so many different people. And as you can see, he's pretty raw still. He'll leave a massive hole.
Rob's family say this new facility meant the world to him. And despite this being such a difficult day, it's a very proud moment.
It's just amazing to be here today for Rob, and he'll be flying the flag, and we'll beat the drum, and we'll keep doing it and raising money, and we will get a cure.
Not just the care centre, but a breakthrough for people with MND. So it's not the hell on earth that it's been. It's going to be good future for MND sufferers, we'll make sure, and Rob wants us to.
Rob played a part in designing the centre, purpose-built and a one-stop shop for patients and their families. After signing for Leeds Rhinos as a teenager, he went on to become one of their greatest. But not long after his retirement, he was diagnosed with MND, a condition he faced with incredible positivity.
I'm not giving in right till my last breath. You know, I have too many reasons to live.
The love he had for his family and the love they had for him shone through as he made his private battle a public one to raise awareness of the disease. Rob overcame so many challenges on and off the field. He'll always be remembered as a giant in rugby league and in the face of this cruel disease.
Well, John joins us now from Headingley Stadium in Leeds. And John, those tributes behind you, and I know many more arriving, show just how loved and admired Rob Burrow really was.
Absolutely right, Sally. So many shirts, scarves, bunches of flowers, and so often people have left a personal note. Perhaps they have a memory here of seeing Rob play at Headingley. He played for Leeds Rhinos for 17 years, appeared more than 400 times and won basically everything that you could win in the game. So he had a stellar career, a career that touched so many Leeds Rhinos fans, but people right across rugby league, of course, as a Great Britain player. But it's the work since his diagnosis with motor neurone disease, 4.5 years, that's taken Rob's name really around the world. And you see words repeated here. Inspiration, one of them. Legend, another key one. I wanted to point out just a couple here. A boxing glove glove there from Josh Warrington, the local former world champion. He says it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the fight in the dog, and you kept on fighting to the end. Of course, Rob famously stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, but was a giant of a man within rugby league. This one here to Rob. Thank you for the memories and inspiration, that's that word again, to us all. Your legacy will live on forever, and we know that it will, through the Rob Burrows Centre for Motor Neurone Disease. And finally, this one in the centre blue with the white shoulders, a legend on the pitch, a hero off it. Sums things up perfectly. Today's ceremonial start of the construction work at the new centre, just a few miles from here, was already in the diary. It was already scheduled to happen, but Rob was determined that despite anything bad happening, and of course ultimately him losing his life, today would go ahead as planned. And that tells you exactly what type of a man Rob Burrows was. Back to you.
John Maguire, thank you very much indeed. China has accused the UK of recruiting a married couple employed by the government as spies. It claims that the intelligence service MI6 started cultivating a man identified only as Mr. Wang while he was studying in Britain 9 years ago. Whitehall is neither confirming nor denying the story. Well, in a moment, we're going to be joined by our security correspondent, Frank Gardner. But first, let's speak to our China correspondent, Laura Bicker, in Beijing. So, Laura, what more can you tell us?
Well, the report by the Ministry of State Security alleges that Mr. Wang and his wife, Miss Zhao, were heavily influenced by MI6 operatives when they came to the UK back in 2015 to study. The allegations claim that MI6 operatives wined and dined the couples, and they said that they did this to find out Mr. Wang's weaknesses. They found, the report says, that he had a desire for money. They offered him a highly paid job, and then they offered him money and security to spy on behalf of Great Britain. They say they gave him espionage training and then sent him back to China to give information about the Chinese government. Now, we don't know what role those two played within the Chinese government, but we are told that it was core and confidential. Now, China has published this in a WeChat account. Now, that's the equivalent of WhatsApp. They wanted its citizens to see this, as both the West and Beijing trade accusations of espionage.
Laura Bicker, thank you. Well, our security correspondent, Frank Gardner, is in the London newsroom for us. And Frank, would it be unusual for MI6 to recruit a spy in this way?
No, this is absolutely classic human intelligence gathering in its purest form. Britain does it, China does it, lots of countries do it. And people get recruited for lots of different reasons. In this case, if the allegations are true, it was about financial incentive. Remember that 2015 was a time of the so-called golden age of Anglo-Sino-British relations between Britain and China, when a lot of people were being encouraged to come over here. There are still thousands of Chinese students in the UK, so rich pickings for any intelligence agency. China does the same thing.
Frank Gardner, thank you. The time is 16 minutes past 1. Our top story this afternoon. The Conservatives pledged to clarify the legal definition of a person's sex. And we will be hearing more about the issues concerning BBC News viewers as we approach the general election with your voice, your vote.
And on BBC London, the unique 10-year project exploring 200 years of Stoke Newington's history and how the shops have changed through the decades. And of course, we'll be here with the weather forecast just after 1:30. Hope you can join us then.
The BBC has learned that a waste company linked to a £200,000 donation to the First Minister of Wales was under criminal investigation at the time. Vaughan Gething, who took office in March, was given the cash during his leadership campaign. But since December, another of the donors' companies has been under criminal investigation by the environmental regulator. Mr Gething insists he hasn't broken any rules, as Wira Davis reports.
All smiles for the cameras. Welsh First Minister Vaughan Gething is one of the most senior Labour politicians in the UK and a key player in the party's general election campaign. But questions over a £200,000 donation to his own leadership campaign earlier this year won't go away. His successful bid to become party leader in Wales was bankrolled by a waste management company controlled by David Neil, a wealthy businessman who has 2 criminal convictions for environmental offences. Another of Mr Neil's companies runs this troubled landfill site in West Wales.
It's an inescapable stench that makes you retch.
It's horrendous, it's rancid, it's almost like you can taste it.
Other people living nearby say the smell from the site is ruining their quality of life.
I don't want to wake up to my house smelling of rotten eggs, which is worse than my son's nappies. My biggest concern is that it's not being managed as it should be.
David Neil says his company is working with the regulator to stop the smell, but the stench from here stretches all the way down the M4 to the office of Wales's top politician. Up until now, the questions for Vaughan Gething are focused on what one of his donors did in the past. But we can now reveal that one of that millionaire donor's companies is currently under criminal investigation and was when Vaughan Gething accepted the sum of money. The Conservative opposition in the Welsh Parliament, the Senedd, has tabled a vote of no confidence in Mr Gething's leadership.
To him, the prize of becoming First Minister was too great, and he was prepared to sacrifice the integrity of the office of First Minister for the £200,000 that he took.
With news that one of David Neil's companies also revealed plans for a solar farm in this protected area of countryside, the day before a firm he controls made a second donation to Mr Gething, others have questioned the new First Minister's judgment.
You get offered £200,000, the level of due diligence that you would expect to take place in that context would be significant.
Vaughan Gething has not broken the ministerial code in taking the donation, and he retains the full backing of Labour's UK leader, with only weeks to go before the general election.
I'm really looking forward to a new partnership where we can both deliver together for Wales. Thank you, Vaughan.
But we've also discovered that one senior Labour figure offered to lend Mr Gething money to repay the controversial donation in full. He turned down the offer. We've repeatedly tried to ask the First Minister about the new evidence.
Did you know about the criminal investigation before you accepted the money?
Thank you.
But his team said the issues had previously been addressed and were a matter of public record. This week's Senedd vote of no confidence is an unwelcome distraction for the First Minister at a particularly busy time.
Wira Davis joins us live now from outside the Senedd. And Wira, how much of a problem could this cause for Vaughan Gething and for Labour?
Well, Mr Gething has again today insisted he'd done nothing wrong, and he said he knew nothing about this latest investigation, even though it started and was ongoing when he received that £200,000 from a company controlled by the businessman David Neil. That might seem incredulous to many people, given the track record and the history. Was the right due diligence done? That's certainly what opposition parties in Wales, Plaid Cymru and the Conservatives are asking. Mr Gething is facing a vote of no confidence in the Senedd here behind me on Wednesday, where Labour only has a working majority. So it could be difficult for Mr Gething, given the disaffection and the disgruntlement in some Labour ranks. But for the time being, he remains at the forefront of Labour's general election campaign. It's difficult to get a cigarette paper between him and Sir Keir Starmer. Mr Starmer was down here last week giving his full backing to Mr Gething. So I think it will be a very difficult time for Mr Gething. But again, he says he's done nothing wrong. He's not broken the ministerial code. And the company which gave him this £200,000 has again said it wasn't trying to buy anything, seek influence or change government policy by doing so.
Wira, thanks very much indeed. And you can find out more about this story by watching the documentary Wales Investigates a Big Stink. It's on the BBC iPlayer now and on BBC One Wales tonight at 8. Mexico has elected its first female president. Former scientist Claudia Sheinbaum won by a landslide after taking nearly 60% of the votes. She will replace her mentor, the current president, on October the 1st. Our Mexico correspondent Will Grant reports.
A genuine moment of history in Mexico. In a nation where women only got the vote in the 1950s, Claudia Sheinbaum becomes the first woman to break centuries of male domination over the Mexican presidency, shattering the glass ceiling for generations of women to come.
que por primera vez en 200 años.
For the first time in 200 years, women have reached the presidency, she told her jubilant supporters in the capital's main plaza.
It's historic, completely. It's for the women who are no longer with us and those who are still fighting, not just in the political arena, but in any way where we have conviction as women.
To see someone who comes from the fight at the bottom to the presidency, it's so emotional. For me, it's marvelous.
In a nation of such entrenched machismo, what Claudia Sheinbaum has achieved here is no small feat. Other women have tried and failed, but her offer of continuity with the governing party's social policies, which have pulled millions from poverty, have proved hugely popular with the electorate.
Her critics, in particular her opponent in this vote, Xochitl Galvez, are left deeply frustrated, especially by the huge margin of victory. They say her mentor, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, is a populist and an authoritarian, and that Ms. Sheinbaum will govern as his puppet, something she denies. This election has been historic for all the wrong reasons too. It's been Mexico's most violent campaign in living memory, with dozens of candidates threatened and murdered. One of them was the candidate for mayor of Coyuca de Benítez, Alfredo Cabrera, shot in the back of the head by a gunman at his closing rally. His murder was a sign of the huge security task facing Ms. Sheinbaum. A staggering 11 women and girls are killed every day in Mexico, and her critics fear she isn't up to the task of tackling the problem.
If Sheinbaum wins, I think the militarization will continue increasing. They will keep on having ever so more power, you know, both the military and the narco, because they have been together for decades.
For now, her supporters are celebrating having made history. But once the party ends, most voters want the president-elect to prioritise drug cartel crime over all other issues in her in-tray. Claudia Sheinbaum inherits a nation mired in violence. Her challenge now will be to succeed where so many men before her have failed. Will Grant, BBC News, Mexico City.
A man has appeared in court, charged with the murder and kidnap of a 17-year-old girl in 1999. Victoria Hall was last seen alive near her home in Trimley St Mary in Suffolk. Steve Wright, who is 66, appeared before Ipswich magistrates via video link, but he didn't enter a plea. He's also charged with the attempted kidnap of a 22-year-old woman the previous night. An inquest has opened into the death of Zara Alina, who was sexually assaulted and murdered as she walked home 2 years ago. The 35-year-old was attacked by Jordan McSweeney in East London just 9 days after he was released from prison on licence. He was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 38 years. The number of children moving to home education in the UK is at its highest level since the pandemic. A BBC investigation found that councils received almost 50,000 notifications in the last academic year from families wanting to take their children out of school. The latest government figures suggest mental health is the biggest reason for the rise. Now, the Royal College of Nursing says the number of NHS patients being treated in corridors and other crowded places now amounts to a national emergency. 1 in 3 nurses who replied to a UK-wide survey said that on their latest shift, they ended up providing care in a waiting area, a side room or a corridor. Our health reporter Jim Reid has more.
Paul Sims had a heart attack in January. He describes his treatment that day in A&E as excellent. But he then had to spend almost 2 days being cared for in this small corridor because there was no space in the main wards of the hospital.
It was constant foot traffic by doctors and nurses, so it was very difficult for me to even sleep or rest because people were coming in and out, pushing the doors, banging the doors, trolleys were coming through, knocking into me because I shouldn't have been there really in a corridor. And also there wasn't a power supply in the corridor, so my heart monitor went flat.
The hospital where Paul was treated described his experience as less than ideal, but said the same level of care is provided regardless of where patients are located. The Royal College of Nursing, though, is concerned that scenes like this are becoming more common. 1 in 3 of the 11,000 nurses who filled out the union's online survey said that on their most recent shift, they had to look after someone in a corridor, waiting room or other location not meant for treatment. Similar results were seen across the 4 nations of the UK.
We are calling this a national state of emergency. Our members are incredibly concerned around the fact that very poor, undignified, unsafe care is being totally normalised. It is not okay for patients to be looked after in corridors, in store cupboards, by nurses' stations, without emergency equipment, without call bells. And sadly, some of our patients are having their entire hospital stay and treatment sitting in a chair, sometimes up to 72 hours. Totally unacceptable.
The Conservatives said the NHS budget had increased by a third since 2010 in England, with more community diagnostic centres opened. The SNP-led Scottish Government said health funding had also risen in Scotland. The Liberal Democrats and Labour both said they had plans to fix or reform the NHS. Jim Reid, BBC News.
Now, a reminder of our top headline this afternoon. The Conservatives pledge to clarify the legal definition of a person's sex. And 80 years on, we will hear from one of the oldest surviving veterans of D-Day. We have got a full weather forecast in the next half hour, but now it's time for a quick look at the weather. Here's Louise.
Hi there, Sally. Well, the image behind me could have been almost anywhere yesterday, but I suspect we may well have peaked already this week. Just take a look at Sunday's highs. All the nations saw temperatures in excess of 22 degrees. Very nice indeed. But looking ahead through this week, noticeably cooler, particularly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Even if we see 18 in the southeast, that's just below par for this time of year. And to add insult to injury, it will be cloudy. It'll be quite breezy at times, with the risk of some sharp, heavy downpours, particularly the further north and west. If I've not put you off, stay watching because I'll have all the details just before 2 o'clock.
Louise, thank you. Now, if you are a regular BBC viewer, you will know that there is one voice that we really value, and it's yours. You've told us you want to be more involved in how we cover this general election campaign, so we want to hear about the issues which matter to you. We're calling it Your Voice, Your Vote. And we can find out a little bit more now with our UK editor, Ed Thomas, and our political editor, Chris Mason. Afternoon, both of you. So, Ed, tell us what this is and what's it for.
Yeah, Your Voice, Your Vote. And the ambition here is for BBC News really to lean in and listen to our audience, put them at the heart of our reporting. So if you're following the election, if you're hearing promises, if you're hearing pledges, and you want to understand more about them, let us know. Let us know the questions, let us know the issues that really matter to you and you want us to investigate. And we can take those questions, we can look at them and we can inform our reporting and put them to the politicians when people like Chris are in front of them.
Well, Chris, I don't need to tell you, it's already been a very, very busy time. How is it going so far?
So it's definitely stepping up a gear, I think, this campaign. By the way, on the whole question of hearing from our audience, there's nothing more important, there's nobody more important in a general election campaign than people who choose how or whether to vote. It's not about the politicians, certainly not about the reporters. It's about people making such a big decision. So I think this project is so key. It's stepping up a bit, Sally, no doubt about it, the campaign. And what we're seeing and we've seen today, and we saw evidence of last week, is a pattern. So the Conservatives have a pattern of making announcements, generating headlines, generating talking points. Yes, there'll be talking points that will divide, that will provoke an opinion, but they have found a knack for generating attention. Now, that is a strategy, I think, grounded in the fact that they know that even though they are the incumbents, they're up against it. The opinion polls suggest they are up against it, whereas Labour are being that bit more cautious. They're saying less things that are brand new, but emphasising what they've been saying in recent months. And we saw that playing out this morning for Labour with their announcement about defence and what they've been saying on defence, and from the Conservatives on the whole question of identity, gender and biological sex.
And Ed, the BBC campaign actually launched this morning. We have already had several thousand people get in touch. What sort of things are they concerned about?
Yeah, it went live this morning. The last time I checked, there was over 2,000, so that number's just increased. since then, so it's striking a chord with the people who matter to us. I'll give you a few examples of what's been said. Alexandra from Cardiff, she wants to know more about environmental issues, climate change policies, the NHS, public service investment. That is what matters to her this election. Sue from Yorkshire, she's retired from the public sector. She wants to know more about pensions and taxing of them and the environment. And Christopher from Birmingham, he's messaged in. He says, what's happened to dentists squeezing the funding to make people go private? So this is what's playing out on people's minds right now. Just a few examples of what people are reaching out to us and telling us.
And Chris, where do you think things are going from here over the next couple of weeks?
So the big focus in the next 24 hours is going to be the first debate between the two candidates to be Prime Minister, so Rishi Sunak against Keir Starmer. Yes, for anyone who's occasionally seen what goes on in the House of Commons, the two of them have exchanged views for quite a few years, but to see them on primetime television tomorrow answering questions from viewers and from the presenter, absolutely key. I think it's the first big moment of the campaign, and there's a whole host of these TV debates to come on the BBC and elsewhere in the coming weeks. And then before we know it, we'll get to those bundles of promises, the manifestos, where we'll seek on behalf of our audience some of the answers to the questions that Ed was just talking about, because they'll have to set out, and if they don't, they'll face tough questions, how they'll take on everything from dentistry to immigration to the health service to defence, the whole platter of responsibilities that a new government takes on.
And Chris, what has surprised you so far?
I think the sense that you have to have, if you're either reporting on it or for the politicians, and I was talking to them this morning, stamina. It's a long, old way yet, and things can still change and change significantly. Election campaigns can really make a difference. Just ask Theresa May, the former Prime Minister, when she called an election in 2017 because she thought she was going to win big, and she went backwards. So this is the moment, and this is why this project is so important, where the power moves away from Westminster, where it moves away from politicians, where they are pleading, to a greater or lesser extent, for the support of millions of people. They're going to spend the next month or so trying to demonstrate that stamina, and those of us traipsing around after them the same thing, to try and get those answers, because it's all about answers to these key questions about people's day-to-day lives.
So, Ed, how do people get in touch?
Yeah, really easy, and already people are getting in touch, and it shows that issues really do matter here. bbc.co.uk/news. Go on your phone, go on your tablet, go on your PC, and on the BBC News app, you'll see a link on there to go and have your voice, your vote there. Email us as well, bbcyourvoice@bbc.co.uk. Tell us what matters most, tell us what you want us to explain, and tell us where you want us to go as well.
Ed Thomas, Chris Mason, thank you. So if you have a question for a politician or perhaps an issue that you are concerned about, you can get in touch by going to bbc.co.uk/news. Still to come on today's programme, we will hear more from rugby league legend Kevin Sinfield following the death of his best friend and Leeds Rhinos teammate Rob Burrow from motor neurone disease. Now it's time to join our colleagues with the news where you are.
Welcome to BBC London, I'm Victoria Cook. First, hundreds of tradespeople are holding what they're calling a van rally in Westminster this lunchtime to highlight the issue of tool thefts. Organisers say the growing number of tools being stolen means thousands are losing their livelihoods. They're calling for tougher measures to stop tools being resold. Miranda Shunkay is there and has sent this report.
Well, we could certainly hear this van rally here in Parliament Square before we could see it. There are literally hundreds of tradespeople taking part in this, and it's not just people from London, it's people from across the country, because they say this issue of tool theft and where these stolen goods are being resold on is a massive issue now, and it's affecting many people's livelihoods and of course their families too. So a lot of these tradespeople, of course, losing another day's pay to be here today. They're causing congestion here, and they say that's what we need to do now to get this issue heard and to get something done about it. Well, we spoke to one builder who's based in Notting Hill, and he told us how it's affecting him.
We try and keep up, and we always buy the new tools, the best tools to do the best job.
and we try and look after our customers best we can. And something like this, they get taken, we have to reschedule work, we have to replace the tools, the van could be off the road for a day or two while we're getting it repaired. It's happening to a lot of people. It's happening to I know more people that have been affected by it than that haven't. It's happening. I mean, I think they said a van's getting broken into every 12 minutes. So it's a big problem that's getting worse.
Well, this convoy is made up of plumbers, electricians, carpenters and builders. And they say London is a hotspot for this type of crime, but it's by no means exclusive to the capital. They say it's happening on driveways, where they're parked on the street, when they're working in offices and other types of commercial buildings, and it's costing them their livelihood. So they've come down here today. They're losing, as I say, another day's pay, but they say so much is at stake now, something has to be done. They want to see stricter enforcement of the existing laws and a clampdown on the resale of stolen goods at places like car boot sales and markets.
Next, family and friends of those killed in the London Bridge terror attack have been gathering this lunchtime to remember the victims on the 7th anniversary. 8 people died and 48 were injured when attackers drove into pedestrians in a van and then launched a knife attack. A plaque now stands near to Southwark Cathedral that pays tribute to the victims and also those who put their lives on the line. There's going to be some changes to rail services across London and the South East after a new timetable was introduced, and it affects several operators. Southern is doubling the number of trains between London, Victoria and Portsmouth, but direct services between Southampton and Gatwick have ended. Meanwhile, South Eastern and Greater Anglia have both increased the number of their trains. Operators say it's in response to changing travel patterns and customer feedback. Next, Matilda Hodgkins-Byrne is among the athletes representing Team GB this summer. And when she does, she'll become only the second mum ever to compete for Great Britain in Olympic rowing. The athlete takes her son, Freddie, to as many events as possible and says it's given her a new perspective. Chris Legg's been catching up with her.
Between now and Paris, for double sculls pair Matilda Hodgkins-Byrne and Becky Wild, every stroke counts. In Lucerne 2 weeks ago, they had one final chance to qualify for the Olympics, and they took it.
I think it's happened so quickly, and now we're straight away on the Paris journey. Just relief. You could feel it this morning going out in the boat. There was just less pressure, less stress.
Yeah, it was just crazy. It was just so much relief, so much excitement, and a lot of shock all in one. I think we'd worked so hard and we both wanted it so much, but to actually go and do it was just incredible.
In Tokyo, Matilda was part of a quad sculls team that placed 7th overall. Life has changed since then with the arrival of son Freddie, who's about to turn 2.
What's it like having Freddie on the water side, and will he be there in Paris?
Yeah, he'll be there. I didn't take him to Europeans, and that was the first time I left him, and for me it doesn't work leaving him behind. When I get nervous, I just become really sad and really miss him. There's always so much pressure with sport, and certainly the event we were in, it was all or nothing, but he kind of pulls me out of that bubble and reminds me there's more to life.
Her having Freddie at home, I think that gives her a different perspective, and actually that's very refreshing. I know that rowing's not everything to her, and that actually means quite a lot to me because it means I can go and switch off when I get home, and rowing isn't everything either.
You've spoken really openly about the challenges of being a mum and combining that with elite sport. What would your advice be to others in the same situation?
It's possible. Yes, I'm lucky in that I've had really good support from my family. British rowing coming back this year have been absolutely brilliant, but it is possible. It's really, really challenging. I've learnt that you could do a lot on very little sleep. But I don't think being a mum should end a dream if you want to do it.
The countdown to Paris is on. Chris Legg, BBC London.
A historian has published the results of a unique 10-year project looking at the changes in Stoke Newington over the last 200 years. Amir Doughton's research focused in and around the Church Street area and looked at how different businesses and trends have evolved through the decades. Rob Taylor's been to meet him.
Number 100. It's been a chemist continuously since the 1860s. Different owners, different companies took over, but it's always been a chemist. I was always a history buff from a very young age, wanted to be Indiana Jones. So when I moved to the area about 22 years ago, I became really interested in the local history, where I documented the history of every shop on Stoke Newington Church Street. About 120 of them since the mid-19th century. Number 14 was 6 different butchers since the 1910s. Butchers used to have special tiles for hygiene, and some of the old decorative tiles are still here, concealed behind the ceiling.
We've been there since 1980. My dad used to run it, and then we took over around about 2020. We specialize in Afro-Caribbean stuff and a lot of groceries.
And this is the oldest shop in Stoke Newton Church Street. It opened in 1951. This is CAC Builders Merchant. I started going through all the old street directories that tell you exactly who traded at each shop. And that really gave me the opportunity to start seeing the trends and analyze all that fascinating information. Stoke Newington during the Victorian era was a very middle-class district. So you had a lot of tailors, shoemakers, bootmakers, confectioners, tobacconists. After the Second World War, it became more industrial, more working class, a lot of repair shops, a lot of small industry. And from the 1990s onwards, you start seeing more restaurants, more estate agents, more design lifestyle shops that opened more recently. Creating the book and having this research, it gave me a chance to meet a lot of the local businesses. So this is Hilda at number 49, the newest shop to open on the street. It's got quite a history.
I think the project Amir's been working on is really fascinating. I've lived here for about 18 years, so I have seen things naturally evolved on the street, so it's nice to meet someone that's kind of really into it.
So this is an ongoing project. I keep updating it every time a shop changes and I see that the sign gets replaced. And I hope that it will continue to evolve and provide people with a really good overview of just how the street is always changing.
Time for a look at the weather now with Corsa.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, it's been quite a cloudy day so far, and for the rest of this afternoon too, a lot of cloud around, and this cloud may still be thick enough for the odd spot of light rain or drizzle in places, but there's a fair amount of dry weather too, and there may be some brighter spells breaking through to end the day, and temperatures quite widely reaching the high teens to the low 20s, 18 to 21 Celsius quite widely. Now into this evening, still a lot of cloud, some clear spells for a time, but by the end of the night, more in the way of cloud in places and staying quite mild as temperatures hold up at around 12 to 14 Celsius with generally light winds. So it is a cloudy start again tomorrow, and tomorrow we're expecting this cold front to push through, and this will bring some outbreaks of patchy rain, some showers around for a time, so a bit of a damp end to the day as well, and temperatures, well, again similar, 18 to 20 or 21 Celsius. Now looking ahead to the next few days, well, we lose those cold fronts, they'll sweep through, and then things become a bit more settled. Drier conditions with some sunny spells at times, but a bit cooler than it has been. So for Wednesday, there may be the chance of 1 or 2 showers at times, but some decent sunny spells as well. A bit more in the way of cloud perhaps on Thursday and for Friday, and temperatures generally reaching around the high teens, so 18 to 19 Celsius. That's your forecast.
So just before we go, I wanted to remind you of the new feature that's been launched on the BBC website in the run-up to the general election. It's called Your Voice, Your Vote, and it's where you can contact the BBC to mention the issues that matter to you. So you can get in touch by using this QR code or by going straight to our website. Well, that's all from us here on the BBC London Lunchtime team. It's time now to hand you back to Sally Nugent with the rest of the BBC News at 1. Bye-bye.
Now, just one day after the death of the rugby league legend Rob Burrow, aged 41, his family and his former teammate Kevin Sinfield have attended a groundbreaking ceremony for the Motor Neurone Disease Centre bearing his name. Building work at Seacroft Hospital in Leeds began this morning at Rob's request. His great friend Kevin explained the difference the centre would make for patients living with MND.
Yeah, so brave, so tough. I wish he could have seen the outpouring of love. I think we all lose special people, but it's very, very rare you lose someone who's so special to so many different people. And as you can see, he's pretty raw still. He'll leave a massive hole, and I know there'll be a lot of people out there who are heartbroken this morning on the news from yesterday. what's really, really important is that Rob Burrow continues to live forever, and I'm sure the M&D community and everyone who supported us previously will make sure that Rob's name is at the forefront of everything we do going forward. And we're amazed at some of the things he did on the rugby field, but to see some of the things he's done the last 4.5 years has been unbelievable, and the respect and love and admiration I've got for him couldn't be any higher. You know, it's a really sad time for everybody involved, the Burrow family especially, with how courageous they've all been. And then to come here today and see some of the fruits of Rob's work, he was so proud of this, and you know, I've heard they're going to try and build it in record time now, because that's what Rob did. He broke records, and he wanted people to have a better outlook on life. He wanted people to have hope. He wanted to find a cure for this disease, and building this centre. And the work he's been able to do over the last 4.5 years will ensure that those who come after him, it'll be a far better journey. You know, I'd urge anybody, if you don't remember Rob Burrow as a rugby player, go and take a look, because you'll be amazed at the guy. Like, he was a superhuman, superman in a game of big, strong athletes, and yeah, I'm sure there'll be a big photo of Rob in this building, and I'm sure there'll be some little kids who walk through with parents and grandparents and relatives who ask, "Who's that?" And I'm also very, very sure the answer that we'll get is he was a legend behind this building, and some legacy for him to leave. Yeah, we're pretty heartbroken this morning, but he was a special guy.
And you can watch a special documentary about Rob Burrow's story and his remarkable friendship with Kevin Sinfield. It's called There's Only One Rob Burrow, and it's on BBC One at 8:30 tonight. It's also on the BBC iPlayer. Commemorations will take place later this week to mark the 80th anniversary of D-Day, when thousands of UK and Allied forces landed on the beaches of northern France to liberate Europe from Nazi occupation. Among them was Percy Chafer from London, and he's been sharing his memories with our reporter, Jane McCubbin.
Are you ready?
Yes.
I am Percival Frank Edward Chafer, age 104, and still going strong.
That was good.
Percy Chafer was there, one of 156,000 Allied troops who landed on the beaches of Normandy 80 years ago and decided the fate of the world.
Soldiers, sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the great crusade toward which we have striven these many months.
Eisenhower gave the word, go, and we went. It's the most amazing sight, all these boats heading for Normandy, you know. What could we expect? The worst, I suppose, really, you know.
You told me, Percy, you prayed.
We all prayed. You say you don't believe in God, but when the time comes, you say, God, don't worry. And I was very, very lucky.
So very lucky. Some 4,400 Allied troops died on D-Day. Around 9,000 were wounded or missing. Gunner Chafer, who landed on Sword Beach with the 7th Armoured Division, remembers it all.
Well, the noise was terrible, wasn't it? Terrible noise, banging, flashing, God knows what, bullets flying around. Just a mass of soldiers running everywhere, really. Some calling for their mates, some you see some of them go down, and you just have to ignore it. It's part of the war. You know, you see your mates die. But they used to let these bombs go, and they would scatter all these anti-personnel mines, and you could hear them whirring down. And you hope one didn't land near you. But there were some guys who would call for their mum. They were really scared.
his memories are still razor sharp. He remembers orders almost impossible to follow, to run into, not away from, the bombs.
Saw these 4 little pills leave the plane, and I thought, there's bombs. So I said, run. And I suddenly realised that the sergeant major had said once, don't run with bombs, run into them. And that's what we did. And the time it came down, you could hear them whistling, and they went over our heads.
These were orders which saved Gunnar Chafer's life.
We could have been the targets, I don't know. They may have seen us and decided we were the poor blokes who could have cop it. But we didn't. Hello, my friend. How are you?
Percy has a lot to be thankful for. Later this year, he'll turn 105. It is thought he is the UK's oldest living D-Day veteran.
That might be the end, who knows?
No, get out of it. You'll be 150 before you know it. He is an absolute legend. He is definitely a legend here. Everybody knows Percy.
He still does his own shopping. He still does his own laundry. He still lives independently in the town where everyone knows his name.
Whatever these two, I do. Play bingo.
And he still thanks God for every day he has lived when so many of his peers fell.
Most of my mates think he looks better than me. A couple of them call him Warren Beatty because of his Hollywood smile.
Warren Beatty.
Eh? For these old guys, I think it's the last one. I don't see any of the D-Day, certainly the D-Day people, being around in 10 years' time. So I think this is absolutely got to be recorded for these people.
But it is his own friends Percy misses. He is one of the last of an ever-dwindling number.
You know, I don't know what's happened to the rest of my unit. As far as I know, they've all gone, you know.
You miss them?
Oh, terribly, yeah. It was 7 years of my life. It was 7 years I wouldn't leave. Again, we were lucky.
You keep being lucky, Percy. 105 in November, is that right?
That's right, yeah. It's not too bad going, is it, really?
It's not.
I'm happy with it anyway.
It is 5 to 2. Now let's get the weather with Louise.
Hi there, Sally. Well, last week it was half term, wasn't it? And we had a real week of mixed fortunes, but we got there in the end. We finished with a final flourish of sunshine. In fact, on Sunday, temperatures peaked between 22 to 24 degrees across the nation. 24 is 75 Fahrenheit, but it's all changed with our week ahead. In fact, the first week of June for some of us, very disappointing. In Scotland and Northern Ireland, temperatures way below par, only 13 degrees. And even if we get 18 in London, that's just below the average, really, for this time of year. On top of that, to add some insult to injury, I'm afraid, it'll be cooler, breezier, and there will continue to be some heavy showers developing. And it's because the jet stream is changing its position. It has been to the north of us over the weekend, and now it's sinking its way steadily south. The jet stream that drives in areas of low pressure and fronts, and so that's going to push these fronts further south and east. Behind it, the cooler air starts to arrive with that northwesterly wind. But just take a look at Scotland at the moment. A glorious afternoon here because the morning has been beautiful. So enjoy the sunshine. You're going to keep it throughout the day. Some brightness into South Wales, southern England as well. But sandwiched in between the two, a lot of cloud. And the cloud has been thick enough here for a spot or two of drizzle. So in the brighter moments, 21 degrees, not out of the question. 70 Fahrenheit, maybe similar values into eastern Scotland as well. But through the night tonight, the emphasis is with the cloud. And as we go into the early hours of Tuesday morning, the winds will pick up and the first weather front arrives, bringing some outbreaks of rain. So temperatures will hold up because of the amount of cloud around, but all change as we go into Tuesday. So that first front will bring some outbreaks of showery rain as it sinks its way steadily south and east. We cling on to some sunshine in southeast England, perhaps, But quite a narrow band will develop of heavy, possibly thundery downpours by the end of the afternoon across northern England and North Wales. Behind it, breezy, showery and noticeably cooler across Scotland, 10 to 14 degrees here. As we go into Wednesday, England and Wales will keep the drier, perhaps even some sunnier weather with it. The sharper showers, the blustery winds further north and west, some of these heavy with hail and thunder, even a little bit of winteriness to the tops of the mountains. 11 to 13 degrees in the north, 15 to 18 further south. And that trend will continue as we close out the rest of the week. On the whole, it stays quieter for England and Wales, but there's likely to continue to be a few sharp, blustery downpours, and the feel of the weather, I'm afraid, stays disappointing. Sally.
Louise, thank you. Now, as ever, you can keep up to date with all of today's stories on the BBC News channel and on the BBC News website and app too. That is all from the 1 o'clock news team for today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
This summer, get ready for something big on the BBC.